Okay. We're recording now. We left off. You had just got to Oregon.
Okay.
You just got to Oregon, and you had traveled with your cousin.
Oh, I got through high school.
You haven't told me about high school yet.
Okay.
No, not yet.
All right. Did I tell you about? No, I didn't. We had been living in the tent.
Yes.
Okay.
You
Well,
told me that.
while we were in the tent, I started. It was winter, and I started to get to know some of the people around. And I don't even remember the boy's name now, but
Thanks, Grandma.
anyway, I can remember vividly, trying to determine my future, what am I going to do, I'm in a different place. And the guy says, he says, I know what I'm going to do. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, I'm going to work in the fields picking beans. And I said, really? Yeah. He said, they pay you so much a pound. It's in the summer, some of it as early as the late spring. And I said, well, do they pay enough to make it worthwhile? And he said, yeah, I got my school clothes this way. And I said, well, where do you sign up? He said, well, I'll show you. And so we went through the winter, and then it was now spring and a little bit later. So he showed me where you go. And what I did was I went to the parking lot in one of the markets, and they would meet there on a Monday morning and early. And then if you didn't have an assignment yet, you'd sign up. And then they'd give you a determination as to whether or not you would remain working there, depending on what you produced.
Just picking beans.
And I remember that the way it worked, you made $2.50 a pound. I mean, 2.5 cents a pound, not $2.
2.5 cents a pound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How'd they factor the half?
Well, they would weigh it, and they would multiply it out by 2.5.
So if it ended up being a 0.5, would they round up or down?
Down, usually, yeah. And one of the rules was you don't get into bean fights. He said that'll get you fired.
What's a bean fight?
Oh, that's where you break up the beans and start throwing them at each other. And he said you don't loaf and you don't fool around because we're hauling you out there. We expect you to work.
Yeah.
And so I started at the age of 11 becoming a bean picker.
Wow.
And I actually worked every summer in the bean fields in order to earn my own clothing.
Wow.
Now the other thing I did is once I learned about harvesting things, I got hired on picking filberts, and we got hired on picking cherries at different times, and each one was so much a pound. I never did too well with cherries because I liked them and I ate them. And I'd catch myself eating it. But anyway, I got that job done.
How many pounds of beans would you usually pull in?
Well, my let's see, my highest.
Your highest and your average. What was your highest?
The highest was 200 and about 90 pounds for a year.
In a year, okay.
I mean for a day.
A day?
Yeah. And
Whoa!
it depended on the harvest time. If it was heavy loaded, you could get more.
Uh-huh.
But there's guys that would put rocks in their sacks and everything, trying to.
Oh, really?
Because we put the beans in a gunny sack,
Right.
and then when you got it full, you tie it and put your number on it, and then at the end of the day, they'd weigh you out, and you'd put the bags at the end of the rows, and we used a 5-gallon can we sat on, or and filled it and put it in, and we were taught, they would check the quality too. They didn't want what they call culls, which was some that were missed from the previous picking,
Right.
and they were worthless as far as the cannery was concerned. And I learned how to pick number one and a number two and number three, but they didn't want anything more than that. They
What is that? Those are the different grades?
Yeah, different size, and anything under a let's see, it would be anything under this. It was an A. It was a number one. And always is a little less than a finger. And if you got bigger than that, then they weren't considered to be the premium.
Huh.
And so they would check it all the time, see what you're picking. And each row would actually produce 6 or 7 pickings during a summer. You'd get through it, and then by that time they'd have you another part of the field, and you get through that.
Wow.
One of the interesting things was that people don't know this about Oregon, but during the summer it doesn't get a lot of rain like it does during the winter.
Uh-huh.
And so they have to irrigate, and so they have a spray, and also they sprayed for killing off, insects and things.
Yeah.
So one of the things, there was a lot of, right around the field, there was a lot of wild blackberries. And so every day at lunchtime, you could just go over to the blackberry patch and eat all the blackberries you wanted.
Whoa.
And they were huge because it got watered and they got killed off the bugs.
Huh.
And I used to come home and the blackberries be as big as my thumb.
Whoa.
And then Mom would make blackberry jam, and we'd use that all during the winter. And so you could go anywhere in Oregon.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the times when we went to visit, your grandma and I were driving down the road, and I said, "See, there's some of the blackberries right side of the road." She said, "Well, let's stop," and I did, and we picked blackberries, didn't we, Betty? We picked a bunch of blackberries on the side of the road.
Wow.
Well, anyway, so that's how that went, and when one of probably the last memorable picking time, my 6th grade teacher owned a walnut orchard.
Uh-huh.
And so we went out to his place, and for lunch, we picked them for him. So,
wow.
And he had an old car. We used to call it the Green Hornet.
The Green Hornet.
Because it would sound like what you heard on the radio. In fact, I have a recording of the Green Hornet now from the old days.
Wow.
And so when that, each summer, I was getting older.
I'm okay, Grandma. Thank you.
And I worked at just odds and ends of things, but I think the first real job after that was I got a paper route, and I started delivering the Eugene Register Guard newspaper in Eugene, and then
I'm gonna see if that's what is it. So I'm gonna see if it's still.
Oh yeah, it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Eugene Register Guard.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so that was your first job. How old were you?
At that point, I was probably 12, 13, something like that.
Wow, okay.
And then on Sundays, I wanted to make more money. So on Sundays, I couldn't do 2 routes because, well, I could have, but it was really killing. But the Oregonian, which is the big paper out of Portland, was the one that people got for Sunday paper. They liked that one. but it was a morning paper, and the Register Guard was an afternoon and evening paper.
Uh-huh.
So I took both, and I started getting up early and delivering the Oregon paper, and Oregonian. And the funny thing that people don't know in California is that you can't just take the paper and toss it on somebody's porch because it rains all the time.
Right.
So each one of the houses had a little tube like this in the front, and you'd put the paper in the tube to keep it dry. So it wasn't a matter of just throwing papers. Also, you had to collect from all your customers yourself. They don't just pay ahead of time and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I still know people that owe me to this day. I know them by name. Yeah.
Let's hear one.
Yeah.
Who still owes you money?
The Adelot family.
The Adelot family, if you're listening.
Yeah.
We're gonna take you to court.
Yeah, but anyway, she was a fine Christian gal, and so was her family. It just, I never could catch them at home. But if you don't get paid, they take it out of what you would get. So you end up paying for their paper.
How long did it take until they said, okay, stop giving them papers?
You know, I don't remember now. But I quit. I know I did. I think I probably, after a year or so.
Yeah.
And never collected. And that's not the only one. There were other families.
Mm-hmm.
Those were hard days still. You know, we're in talking the 50s. And
yeah. So when you
40s.
When you got to Oregon, what grade did you start? Didn't you say?
I started in the 4th grade.
4th grade.
Okay. And what? Maybe I mentioned this before, but I was way behind in everything. And so what I did was I was very embarrassed going to a new school, and knew I was behind
because of
California schools.
Wow.
So I'd already failed the 1st grade.
Whoa.
Yeah, I failed the 1st grade in California.
Okay.
Because we traveled around. I never got more than a couple of weeks in the school, and then we'd be somewhere else.
Right.
So when we were in we were in Puente. We settled in there. Dad was working at Crosby's foundry during the war. The 1st grade teacher went to my mom and dad and said, he really doesn't know the material. It would be a crime to move him forward. He really needs to repeat this. And so they agreed and said, okay. So I did the 1st grade over again.
Wow.
And in spite of all that, by the time I got to the 3rd grade, because of the progressive education in California, they never pushed you forward. Whatever you were comfortable doing, that's where they'd leave you. And so I was in the 2nd grade speller when I was finishing the 3rd grade, and I was still in the 1st grade math book, and in the let's see, I was in the 3rd grade reader. And so I knew where I was. So we got in this Oregon school, and there have been a lot of people moving up from California and other states. And so the school was overwhelmed with students. So the 4th and 5th grade was in the same room. And they handed out the books, and I looked, and it said 4th grade. I thought, oh boy. So I went up to the teacher, and I'll never forget this. I said, really embarrassed. I said, "Oh well, I'm only in the 2nd grade speller, and I'm only in the going into the 3rd grade math level, and I was only in the 3rd grade reading level, not going into the 4th grade in any level."
Right.
I'll never forget, she put her arm around me. She said, "Honey, I don't care where you were. but I know where you are, and I want to help you.
Oh, wow.
And you're in the 4th grade now, and I'm going to teach you how to be in the 4th grade.
Wow.
And so, struggling as I did, she really pushed me, and I matriculated from the 4th grade to the 5th grade. So I actually made that big jump, but there were holes in my education, so I really struggled.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at my report cards, you would see that they indicated that I was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the comments was he skips over his English stuff so he could read more. So anyway, I got.
You liked reading even back then, huh?
Yes.
Even when you were struggling.
Yeah, but because remember this is before television,
Oh, okay.
and this is muddy, rainy, dark, every day after school. What do you do?
Yeah.
So I listened to the radio. As long as my dad could stand it, he would let me listen. And I'd find a book to learn how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from average reader, maybe below, till I was reading real fast, lots. So I got the one who owned the walnut orchard was my 6th grade teacher, a nice guy. I really liked him.
Uh-huh.
So I began to perform much better in 6th grade, and so I matriculated. Our school was divided 7th, 8th, and 9th for what they call junior high, and then 10th, 11th, and 12th was high school. So middle school today was equivalent to junior high school. So I got into 7th grade, and I was clicking along pretty good.
Okay.
And then I got into the 8th grade, and they did a Stanford test, which is like the SAT.
Right.
S, by the way, stands for Stanford.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Stanford Achievement Test.
Right.
And so they did a test on me. And lo and behold, in some characteristics, some places, I was doing 2nd year college work.
Whoa.
So I went from below average to above average
In the span of what?
in a span of about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Whoa.
And I just become a ferocious student at that point. And you went into the 9th grade. I matriculated. I went into from junior high school to high school.
Mm-hmm.
Took a class in history under a Mr. Huff, and it was my piece of cake because I really liked it. And I did a study on the King Tut's tomb of all things.
Yeah.
And Mr. Huff would come to me and said, "Have you ever had an IQ test?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." Well, he said, "You really excel." I said, "I do?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Keep going on your education." So what I did when I was, I got to back up now. Just about the time I was in junior, my junior year. No, not junior, it'd be sophomore year.
High school. Okay.
Dad sold the house. And I'm like,
whoa.
Now Eugene is a town of about 35,000. All the surrounding towns were small, real small. Some of them were 150. Some of them were 200 people.
What?
Yeah, they were really tiny.
That's really small.
Yeah, really tiny places.
Okay.
And they moved out to Marcola. And because he traded our house, 2 houses, and 3/4 of an acre for a piece of farmland, 20 acres, and an old, rundown, broken down house. out in Marcola.
Huh.
And so I sat down with Dad at that point, and the thing I didn't mention to you was, as soon as I hit 16, I really got serious about finding work. And I got hired at the Eugene Drive-In Theater when I was 16 years old.
Mm.
And I also was old enough to join the National Guard, Oregon National Guard, which at that time, every male, every young man had 3 years that had to do of military service. It was a recruitment kind of thing. But if you went into the National Guard and finished out your 3 years, then they couldn't draft you. So that made sense. I didn't want to go in the Army.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. But anyway, I had a job. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I said, that school out there in Marcola, I said, that is just a little tiny place. I said, I've got my future figured out. I want to go to college and such. And I've got it all laid out here in the high school. And Eugene High was the largest school in the total old area and one of the highest graded schools. I said, if I could find a place to stay, could I leave home? Because if I lived in Marcola, I couldn't go to that school. And Dad said, let me think about it. I'm the oldest out of 6.
Right.
And I don't know where Dad got this, but that time I got really involved in church. But it wasn't really a worship service. It was more Bible school studying and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there was a family that lived next door by the name of Atwood. And they were Seventh-day Adventists. And every Saturday they would try to snaggle me and get me to go to their church.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I went because it was they were kind of out there, but I enjoyed being with the people and stuff.
Right.
So Dad was talking to him, and he said, my son wants to stay in town, and I just don't know where he could stay for a reasonable amount of what he's doing for a living, with his job. And they said, I think we know a place. And Dad said, well, who is this person? I said, well, she rents out rooms and is in downtown Eugene, and a real fine older lady with a mentally struggling son. And Dad said, well, let's look into it. So we did. And I can't remember now exactly what I paid her, but it was very small. And I think it was like $8 to $9 a week or something like that.
Wow.
And so she said, yeah, she would rent to me. And then she'd supply a few meals from time to time. I thought, yes. So I ended up, Mom and Dad moved out to the farm. And I ended up moving into town, into the rooming house. And I was in the sophomore in high school.
Wow. And so what did your dad go to do, work at a farm?
My dad was a carpenter. And so the problem with Oregon is that if you don't have indoor work to do as a carpenter, you don't have work.
Right.
In the wintertime. So it was really hard life. There was a lot of work when we first moved up there, but it got worse and worse. So, but I was so lonely living away from the family, and I was young. I was just 16, 17 years old.
Right.
And so I worked every day of the week except Tuesdays. They gave me the Tuesday night off. But I had to work every weekend. I worked every night and went to high school at the same time.
Whoa.
And so built good relationships where I worked, but I wasn't able to do any extracurricular anything.
Wow.
I wanted to be in the choir, but I couldn't meet the requirements of being at practice. And I wanted to be in sports, but I couldn't do that because I couldn't be at the practices.
Right.
So I didn't get to do any of those things when I was in high school.
Huh.
And I just worked. And so that's what happened in Oregon all the way through high school.
Wow.
And I even got known for working in the drive-in by my classmates.
Oh, really?
They all knew I was there, yeah, because they wanted me to help them get in for nothing.
Oh.
And I even, in my old yearbook, have Danny Ainge's dad, Don Ainge, do a drawing of him sneaking in the drive-in and me letting him in.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So anyway, that's kind of how my high school days went. Very busy. Had 2 car wrecks
Wow.
during that time. One was with a truck full of scrap iron, which is very fortunate that I survived that one.
Yeah.
And the other one was on the way in a snowstorm. I got T-boned by a guy. Also during my high school, Dick Carle, that's C-A-R-L-E, and I were fairly close from grade school on.
Uh-huh.
And he invited me out to go swimming in the Willamette River, South Fork. And I didn't want to let him know I couldn't swim that much. So we went out, and I can still see this. It's like a photograph. And so I was real careful. I didn't want to get out in the river. And yeah, he's a good swimmer. And he was a short guy. He was not very tall. He's about 5'6", maybe 5'5". And so he had launched out into the river, and I kind of went out a little farther, and I didn't realize I was on a sandbar, and I stepped off into the main channel. Whoa! And I got, well, I should be able to make it. He swam real well and swam right across to the other side, and so I started swimming, and I couldn't make any headway at all. In fact, I just got farther out in the main channel and beat myself to pieces trying to swim. And I mean, literally to the point where I couldn't move my arms. I was going to drown.
Wow.
And about that time, Dick called back and he said, "You need some help?" And I hate it. I said, "Yes." I said, "Yeah, Dick, I don't think I can make it by myself." And and his mom and dad are on that other shore.
Yeah.
And so his mom and dad are over there, and he's over there now. So he comes back. He said, "Well, just grab a hold." And I said, I always had a clear mind. I said, "Dick, I don't think that's a good idea. Is there some other way you can help me get out of here?" He said, No, go ahead. Just grab hold." Well, I did. We both went down.
Oh, wow.
I came up, and he was in panic mode immediately. And so now what? I'd already gone down twice. This was the third time.
Yeah.
And I had no strength. I just couldn't do anymore. And Dick was really panicsville because he knew that we were both going to drown
Right.
if I didn't get loose from him. And once you get a hold of somebody and you're drowning, you don't let go.
Yeah.
So anyway, as my head came up out of the water the last time, I looked over on the shore, and there was a man and a woman standing next to his mom and dad. And the man said, "You need some help, boys?" And Dick yelled, "Yeah, we do." And he said, "Okay," and he dove in, came up to where we were, and then started talking to me and said, "Now you let go of him and roll over, and I'll take hold of you, and I'll take you in." And so I did. and he towed me across the river to the bank. I was so exhausted, I couldn't even get up off of the sand. I was just flopped. And I looked up, and that man and woman were gone.
Huh.
And I never saw them again.
Really?
I don't know who they were. I've even wondered if they were angels, unaware.
Wow.
That was a very strange event. I was that close to dying.
Yeah.
And the 2 car wrecks, either one of them I could have died in.
Yeah.
So that's some of the times of being spared. You don't really know, and maybe someday I'll find out.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so I went, and it was time for my senior year, and I was doing real well in school, in spite of the fact that I didn't have enough time to study. And I took a class in English, college prep English, and I hated grammar. I was always behind in spelling and grammar and stuff.
Yeah.
But I had a teacher who hated it too, and so she always made the emphasis on the literature side. Ooh, that was my piece of cake.
Right.
So I memorized poems and did all this and pulled an A in the class, but I shouldn't have. I should have. She should have made me do better in the grammar side.
Yeah.
But I graduated with a decent GPA, but it wasn't really great. And I just had too much going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I also was in the National Guard. And in the National Guard, I liked the guns and all that. I got to qualify with an M1 rifle, and I was sharpshooter, even though my eyes were not that good.
Wow.
And expert was the top. And so every year we had what's called the war games, and we would go up to Seattle, Washington, and Cape, and to my mind's a little blank in the name of it's a very famous base, and we would go through the war games. And so I was private, like everybody else, and we ended up in this one war game. I remember they'd made me radio man. I thought, gee, I hate to be a radio man. Because the radios in those days weighed about 30 pounds on top of your pack, on top of your rifle, on top of all the gear that you have to have.
Right.
And it had a big antenna on it. And then you were assigned to one of the officers or one of the non-coms. And I was assigned to an officer. And so we had this big huppaloo and, bombs going off around us. And I mean, it was simulated warfare.
Wow.
And being the hero type, I decided, I was going to put my 110% in. So I ran all over the the battlefield with this radio on my back, running from one person to another, to telling him things, and then commenting. And I talked to Sergeant so-and-so, he'll move up, and that kind of stuff. And so after the end, they do a critique, and the colonel in charge of our regiment, and I was in Company C, singled me out, and in front of the whole regiment said, "Now that's the kind of soldier you need to be." Well, I had just gone to heaven. I thought, somebody actually thinks I'm okay and I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
And my first sergeant came up and said, well done, son. Oh, by the way, you've got guard duty tonight. I thought, Sergeant, I can't hardly stand up. I poured everything I had in it.
Yeah.
And he said, also, we're going to raise you to acting corporal.
Wow.
And so I got raised to acting corporal
Wow.
at the age of about 17. Okay, so I felt like I had done pretty well, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
So I was not a drinking person, and all the young guys, when they got away from home, they all wanted, nobody checked their IDs, and they're all drinking away, big time.
Yeah.
And I had too much of that at home, so I said, I'm not, they'd invite me, I said, no, guys, I'm not, I poured out more than you've drunk, so forget it. So anyway, they'd all take off, and there I'd be in the barracks alone, all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Said, this is for the birds. I don't like this. If you would do something. And they went to the burlesque places for the gals jumping around with no clothes on.
Yeah.
Because Seattle was well known for being a port city.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys came in. He'd been drinking. And we all had our rifles all stacked up. They were everybody knew the number. Mine was 3877635. Yeah, I still remember the number. You had to know it.
Whoa.
And so I'm sitting on my bunk, and he comes in, staggering in, and he says, I don't feel very good. And he threw up over all the weapons. And I thought, buddy, you are in real trouble.
Oh, no.
So the first sergeant comes in and says, who did this? I'm sorry, Sarge. He said, you aren't half as sorry as you're going to be. He said, you're going to clean every one of those weapons to my specifications. So this guy got to clean probably 50 rifles or more just because he vomited.
Whoa.
Yeah. So anyway, we had a break while we were up there. And the sergeant said, well, because you're an acting corporal, we'll let you go up with the non-coms. And on my cousin's yacht. I said, well, that's cool.
Whoa.
We're on Puget Sound. I mean, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I said, there are some perks. I like that.
Yeah.
So we get on this converted Coast Guard cutter that belonged to his cousin, which was literally the largest yacht on Puget Sound. And so here we are on here, same old thing, everybody drinking like fish.
Oh, yeah.
And here I am, the only sober judge, watching everybody. And I had only been accepted the Lord just maybe a year. And we had a chaplain with us, and he became drunk. And I thought, well, that's embarrassing. He's supposed to be a Christian, and look at him. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. He started mocking things, and he would take the whiskey bottles and drop them off the bow of the boat and pretend to be baptizing them. Oh. And I thought, I said, God, don't let me ever be like that. I said, that is so embarrassing for you and for any Christian. So anyway, we got back, and I went on through the senior year. And I didn't tell you how I became a Christian, but that happened I was about 16, 17. There was this real cute gal in the little church where we went on Sundays, in the little Church Christ right there. And I thought, I think I'm going to ask her out. So I had never dated much, so I asked her out for a date. And so another fiasco. I had a real cool car though. It had glass packs on it, and you could really make it roar if you wanted to.
Really?
And so I had a 1942 Dodge that I had saved up money so I could buy. Club Coupe. I mean, it was a cool car, made by Chrysler.
Huh.
Anyway, so I picked her up at her house, and we were going to go roller skating. Now, I had learned how to roller skate, but I hadn't skated for a long time. So I get out with her, and I'm a little nervous, and I cannot stand up on my skates. I'm thinking, there must be something wrong with these skates. I used to be able to skate all right, and she was a good skater. So here I am going up and down and twisting back and forth, trying to keep my balance.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we hadn't been there that long, I fell all over her, fell over the top of her, knocked her down, knocked me down. And I said, well, maybe we ought to go on home. I'm sorry. I used to skate. Some reason I can't skate very well tonight. And she said, oh, it's all right. It's all right. Don't worry about it. And so we get in the car, and I think, gee whiz, I think I'll show her. And then I got a cool car at least. So I'd keep it in gear and, crank it up pretty good. Mm-hmm. You hear this rumble, Policeman pulls me over. Oh. I can't believe this.
Nice.
He said, son, excessive sound, that's against the law in Oregon. Yes, sir. Writes me out a ticket.
Oh.
I'm thinking, what else could go wrong? So she's not saying much. We're driving back to Marcola.
Uh-huh.
And we get right at the parking lot of the church, which is a tiny little thing. And she said, pull over here for a minute. I thought, oh, what's this all about? And she said, I noticed you weren't taking communion on Sundays. And I said, well, I've never been baptized, and I know that you need to be baptized before you start taking communion. She says, well, why haven't you been? And she says, I said, well, I've been intending to. Well, she said, I think you need to do that. I said, okay. So I drove her to her house, and she made a beeline out of the car, and boom, she was in her house. So that Sunday, I went to Mom and Dad and Jack and Gloria, and they were the oldest, and I told them, I've decided I'm going to go forward during the invitation and be baptized. My brother Jack said, well, I want to do that. And he said, I've been kind of wondering when you were going to. And I said, okay. And Gloria says, well, I want to do that too. And I said, oh, okay. Now, I gave this testimony at that church years later. And so we came forward, and then during that week, there was a student preacher at that church. They took us into the University Christian Church in Eugene and baptized the three of us. And I went into the ministry, Jack went into the ministry, and Gloria married somebody that went into ministry. And so one person's witness changed our lives.
Wow.
Well, when it came time for me to graduate from high school, Mom and Dad had decided the year before to sell the farm and go back to California. So I graduated with no family there.
Wow, nobody was there?
No, just me and my landlady. In fact, I went to the prom. I couldn't dance. I didn't know how to dance. And I thought, well, maybe I could learn before. And so I would go in the living room and do a square, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But then I didn't go ask anybody to go. And I can still see myself standing outside, looking in at all of the kids and I'm the only one not in there. Well, anyway, I graduate, and my cousin George had come back from either Minnesota, I think, or I think that's where he was, and I told him, I said, I don't want to live up here by myself, so I'm going to leave Oregon and go back and be with Mom and Dad or being close.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, why don't we hitchhike? Wow. Be cheap. I could do that. And so I said, I'll have to quit my job, and I got to get out of the Oregon National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
My recruitment time is just about up. So I went to the guardhouse, to the headquarters, and they mustered me out because I was leaving the state. And also that made me ineligible to be drafted. And then I had a little money put aside, but so we head up. We're going to go up, and you're going to see this one day because we went up the Mackenzie River, which flows into the Willamette, and beautiful, beautiful area. Goes all the way up the Cascades and over.
Mm.
And where Uncle Mike is now is the other side of that.
Oh, his house in the Bend?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a little ways from there, but that's we could see the Three Sisters from my house, and Mount Bachelor was near there, etc. But anyway, so we get up to the top of the pass. Now the snow is pushed back and is about 7 feet on each side. You have this just channel that you drive through. So we get a ride all the way up to what they call the pass, and nobody will pick us up and take us over. And my cousin George never was known for patience. And he was like, well, I don't understand that. I've hitchhiked all the way to Minnesota. I shouldn't have this problem. And it's getting later and later, and we're cold and wet. And he said, oh, this isn't going to happen. He said, let's just go on back downtown. I said, do you think somebody will pick us up and take us down? Oh, yeah. So we crossed over the road, turned around, put our thumb up. Somebody picked us up right away and took us right down.
Wow.
And so then we moved into town. And then all of a sudden, there I am. I have no house to live in because I already moved out. Had no job, so I didn't have any money. I was no longer in the National Guard. And I said, well, I gotta get to California. So I counted my nickels and dimes, and okay, so I bought a ticket on the bus and rode the bus from Eugene down to Los Angeles. Got off in downtown LA, and I said, well, I can go over to my Uncle Lyle's house till I can get myself oriented, because Mom and Dad have moved out to Yucca Valley, of all places, in the middle of the desert. And I said, I don't know what it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
So I get off the bus, and I said, I need a local that I can get to Inglewood. Oh, they said, you never heard about the bus strike? I said, the what? The bus strike. He said, they're still running buses horizontal from here, but nothing vertical. So there's no way to get from here to there. I said, are you serious?
What?
I've already traveled 1,000 miles, and you're telling me I can't get from here to Inglewood, which is like 30 miles.
Yeah, not that far.
Yeah. And so they said, well, just take this one, and it'll get you as close. And then maybe you can call somebody. And I thought, oh, for crying out loud. And so I got on that little commuter bus, and it moved me within probably 20 miles.
Sure.
And I said, I sure hate to call my uncle in a situation like this.
He didn't know you were coming.
He didn't know I was coming.
Oh.
So I called my Uncle Lyle, and I said, Uncle Lyle, and I gave him my whole story. He said, where are you? I told him what street I was on. He said, stay put, stay next to the corner. I'll be right over. Came over and picked me up.
Wow.
And took me to his house.
Whoa.
And then there's a lot of future after that.
Yeah, we'll stop there for now.
Okay.
That's a good place to stop. Thanks, Grandpa.